here just because he's gonna talk to some of the PD
Yeah,
tech issues.
I'm on.
Perfect. All right, there you are. All right, all right.
So
I'll
the
remain quiet.
recording
Thank
has
you.
started.
Yep. Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is the March 5th meeting of the Joint Capital Planning Committee. And seeing we have a quorum, I'm calling the meeting to order at 4:03. And the first thing I will do, since we're conducting this virtually, is to call on the members of the committee to make sure they can hear and be heard. Bob Hegner.
Present.
Lee Edwards.
Present.
Nat Larson.
I'm here.
And Bridget Hines.
Here.
And I'm expecting Hala Lord to join us, just so everyone knows of the people who will be speaking. Kathy and Bob are both on the council. Lee Edwards and Nat are on the are here as library trustees, and Bridget is here for the schools. So I'm turning it back over to you, Melissa, having called us to order.
All right, so the agenda had a review of the capital improvements list. I have made some small edits to it, but I did not put a new updated one in the packet, but the list is essentially the same, and we haven't changed any of the financing. I did talk about with a couple people during the regular budget meeting some requests that maybe should have made it in here that we might, before those groups present, add later, but they were relatively nominal dollars. So when I have an update of that, I'm happy to give that to you. And then, we have the Amherst Police Department here to talk about their requests, of which they have 3, and 2 in their department and one request in vehicles. And then we have facilities here to talk about their building and maintenance repair plan, which is what the request is. It's not for any one particular project. It's for a plan that they can articulate. And I'm not sure if Rob and Jeremiah are prepared to talk about the request for the $500,000 for additional Bank Center renovations, or if we're going to hold that over until the planning meeting. So.
But I think we're ready to proceed in your order. Melissa, is the police are first, correct?
Yep. So police, this first request is the vehicles. Let's just do the vehicles first. The original request did come in at for $360,000, which is the request in the out years, and this is to replace 4 vehicles, which would keep them or catch them back up to being on track for years when those vehicle replacements were decreased. And again, unfortunately, this year we did decrease a lot of the vehicle requests that came before capital planning. And so I don't know who here on the police side wants to speak to the request of the need for the vehicles, the age of the fleet, that kind of thing.
We're relatively informal, so you can just speak up. If it's, I'm not sure whether it's Chief Ting or who is taking vehicles.
Sorry, it was me, but I was on mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, our fleet, we're trying to move towards eventually to be, to have electric vehicles. However, unfortunately, the technology has not caught up for us to be able to have fully electric vehicles. In any police cruiser, there are just so many components, so many electrical components, laptop computers and the lighting systems and whatnot that take up way too much juice for lack of a better term, and it just cannot fulfill that. So right now, our entire fleet is hybrid technology. And so we had estimated a fully equipped cruiser to be about $90,000 each, and that's fully equipped. In the past, we have requested we kind of had a pattern for cruisers to replace the ones that are the oldest ones within our fleet. We usually keep each vehicle to at least 100,000 miles, and that could vary in terms of how long that lasts. It's usually anywhere between 3 to 5 years, depending on if it's a patrol vehicle or an administrative vehicle or a detective vehicle. So the usage is a little bit different. But again, in the past, we had this pattern where we would request for through a 4-year pattern. So we would go 3, 3, 3, and then 4 in terms of requesting for vehicles. And in fiscal year 21, it was a 4-vehicle year. We didn't receive any. In fiscal year 22 and 23, we received 3 vehicles. In 24, we were slated for 4, but we're cut down to 3. So we're down 5 vehicle replacements, and we were trying to catch up. And so that's why we are trying to request $360,000 really for the next 5 years to try and play catch up. So we've learned that throughout the years that, you know, the vehicles that exceed 100,000 miles, the warranty is no longer there, and it's just not worth investing more money into these vehicles. They are used 24/7, 365 days a year. So these vehicles are obviously very important for us to be reliable, to respond to calls for service, but they also need to be reliable to just not break down, so we can not pay as much in repairs. So that is the request within itself.
Are there questions from the committee? And Melissa, you can probably take this down from the
Okay.
screen as we take questions, so people can, and well, partially I can see hands. Bridget.
Yeah, I was looking through the spreadsheet of all the different departments, and one thing that struck me is a lot of departments have vehicles that are well over 100,000 and have
Mhm.
rotations that are less so. And I'm just wondering how we as a committee are making sure that we're being equitable between departments, especially given that other departments aren't receiving any vehicles this year. You know, you don't want to give one kid the ice cream cones and not the others.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand that. And I think my argument for that is that, you know, again, we are a 24/7, 365 day operation. So those vehicles are constantly being used. You know, without vehicles, we can't respond to calls. And I would argue that that's the only real difference between us and other town departments.
But like the fire department and the DPW, those are they both 24/7 operations too, or maybe not? I don't know, but I'd imagine.
They are, but in kind of in different capacities. You know, certainly. I don't know enough about. I think there's differences in each fleet. So the DPW, I think there's different departments where they have vehicles that are used a little bit more often than others. And same thing with the fire department. I don't think their ladder trucks are being used every single day, but you know, we have vehicles that are on constant patrol versus just being called out. So it's a little bit different.
So I do want to say just on that, for as far as the the fire department. So their ladder trucks are on a rotation, and they do have some vehicles that are more similar to a command vehicle of the police department, you know, for administrative staff to do inspections and that kind of thing. And those requests for those vehicles were pushed out in the fire department. However, their ambulance vehicles are funded through the ambulance fund. And so therefore we did not defer those requests. So all of their requests that are being approved for vehicles are coming directly from the ambulance fund. And that would be the vehicle that I think is most similar to the type of vehicle that Chief Ting and the police department is asking for here, the vehicle that is used, 24/7 on call with a staff person in it 24/7 a day would be the ambulance vehicles. And they do have a request for an ambulance this year.
I see Counselor Lord has her hand up, and I also want to make sure she's joined us, that you can be heard. Counselor Lord?
Thank you, Chair Shane. I just have a quick question around data, because I am absolutely sure that the APD gets notified or does more of those after-hour calls than the other departments like DPW, maybe ambulance. Thank you for mentioning that, Melissa. So I don't know if that might be helpful in the argument to say, here's how many calls we get in the after hours versus fire, which is really specific. Ambulance is less specific, but maybe that would be helpful to know how many after hour calls so that we could not have confidence, but also convey why this is an importance to the public. Thank you. Also, I don't know if that was clear. If it wasn't clear, please let me know and I'll,
No,
okay.
So I will say that the calls are something that we report in the regular operating budget. We do not report them as they align to time of day, but that is information that is provided not in this part of the project, but maybe I can work with so the only two departments that are staffing vehicles 24/7, DPW gets an emergency call, but they're calling someone outside of their normal business hours for that. That's a kind of a callback sort of emergency versus a 24/7 operation, which would be the ambulance, fire, and police.
Thank you.
Nat?
Yes, for Chief Ting, I'm sorry if I have missed this or didn't see it, but or if you don't have the information at your fingertips, even an estimate, what would you say would be the mileage of your 4 oldest or highest mileage police vehicles?
Certainly over 100,000 miles. I don't have the exact mileage off the top of my head. But we have certainly, our oldest vehicles are in excess of 100,000 miles.
And those are how many, roughly?
I don't know. Unfortunately, our
Okay.
fleet manager is not here.
Yeah, okay.
He's on vacation. I wish he was here with us to give you a more exact breakdown. But usually we have a rotation also where we have some of, we try to utilize our oldest vehicles the most that need to be replaced. So certainly we have a rotation schedule as well to try and preserve the newer vehicles as long as possible. But at the same time, one of the issues is once they do hit 100,000 miles, the warranty expires, and it just becomes much more costly versus having a newer vehicle.
So Nat, the vehicle list we got from last year, Melissa's working on updating that, but you can at least look at how many police cars there were last year in February.
There were 27 last year.
Yeah.
And that does not include parking or animal control have separate vehicles for that. And I'm let me see if I can.
So if I may just add, the portion of the vehicles that we are looking to be replaced are strictly the patrol vehicles that are being utilized 24/7, 365 days a year. We do have vehicles in our fleet that are not utilized as often. Certainly we have, and they're utilized for different reasons, but we will hold on to those vehicles for much longer. So for example, we, as of last year, we had a vehicle that was about 15 years old. And that was finally replaced within our fleet. So not every single vehicle is is like 100% up to date. A lot of them will be utilized for different purposes.
Nat,
Is that the Ford Explorers are the patrol cars, Chief Ting?
That's
Um,
correct.
so your hand's still up, Nat? Is that okay? So I see Bridget, your hand is up again, I think. Yep.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I was looking at that spreadsheet, but now I realize it's from last year, so there may be new
Yeah.
numbers in it. But there were 2 cars with 101,000 and 104,000. And those were the Ford Explorers. And then there's a Honda Accord at 170,000. Maybe all the police cars could be Honda Accords, because it looks like that has a good life cycle on it.
Yeah, we wish.
You know, one thing, I mean, I understand you run out of the maintenance contract, but you know, like 100,000 is still, in 3 years, that's still fairly young for a car, you know? It's
For,
like
yeah,
a-
I mean, for a regular civilian car, that is true. And certainly I would argue with our administrative vehicles are driven more like civilian vehicles. But these are hard miles that are being driven, you know, and certainly, for example, with the hybrid vehicles, you know, they're much heavier. So even replacing the tires, they wear out much quicker. So they wear out about 30% quicker than a normal vehicle. And again, we are responding to calls. So these are hard miles. When I say hard, I mean these unfortunately these vehicles get beat on to the extent that they are traveling at fast speeds and stopping and starting, and there's a lot of idle time that is associated with it. So they are built a little bit more robustly than your average vehicle. The police interceptors are a little bit heavier duty, but nevertheless, those are really tough miles that are being applied.
Just, we asked this last year, and I think the answer was partly it was still too soon to tell whether the hybrids are lasting longer than the pre-hybrid cars. You know, that I know there's a small battery and a larger, so I can understand the tire part, but does the hybrid itself last longer, or do you not have enough experience yet to know that?
Unfortunately, the sample is kind of small in terms of the years.
Yep.
However, we have experienced a lot of issues with the hybrids. We kind of chalk that up as newer technology that hasn't been totally solidified yet. So there have been a lot of maintenance issues, more than we had expected. So there have been some rising costs with our maintenance. We've expended our maintenance allotment much quicker than we normally have in the past year. So yeah, it has been kind of problematic.
Thank you. So there's, if people don't have any other questions on this, there are 2 other requests. One is a large number and one is a smaller number. So I don't know which order you want to take them in and who wants to speak to them.
You want me to start with the watch video system?
The watch guard,
Yeah.
Yeah.
sure. And so, you know, we do have some subject matter experts here. You know, we have the director of our IT, Sean Hannon, and we certainly have our other IT specialist, Bill Glover. And they will speak to the effect of our WatchGuard in-car video system. And I will just introduce in a nutshell what that is that's all of our cruiser cameras that are attached to every vehicle. It also encompasses all of our video surveillance system within the police station, as well as for our interview rooms. So this system itself is about, it's more than 20 years old. And the reason why we're putting in this request is the company WatchGuard was recently bought out by another company called Motorola. And Motorola, after they bought out the company, they have revamped the system. So the current system that we have is obsolete. So when portions of it begin to fail, there's no longer any support or replacement for that particular item. So we are asking for a total replacement of our entire WatchGuard system so it can be up to date with the latest technology. And again, the biggest reason is there's a lack of support for it and the items are obsolete. And if you don't mind, Sean, if you don't mind jumping in, Sean and Bill, to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. So
I just had a quick coughing fit, so hopefully it stops. We'll find out. Go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
yeah, so I don't have much to add to what Chief Ting said. But it's a system that they have been using for 20 years. It's what records all their videos in the vehicles, booking rooms, interview rooms. It's one system that does all of that for them, which makes it very easy from a training perspective. That for the officers and everybody else, it's the same system for us to support it. It's the same system. It's the same equipment. That equipment is something that when they buy a new vehicle, it gets moved from vehicle to vehicle. So what's in a 1-year-old Cruiser is still a 10, 15-year-old piece of equipment currently, just because rather than they don't buy new every time, they just move it from vehicle to vehicle, because that's the most cost-effective way of doing it. And that hardware, some of them are starting to fail. The batteries have failed on them, so the clocks need to be reset if they get rebooted and things like that, which adds to adds work for their fleet manager or IT if he's unavailable. And then the software that it runs on is also obsolete and no longer supported. So as they start running into problems, they can't get support on it. So it's really it's pretty critical that it gets replaced, because they use it for all their stops. So
Yeah. Operational. I'll just add that it's come to be expected that this technology is present. They use it in their day-to-day operations from their officer standpoint. They use it for when they're making stops. They use it when they're booking people during arrest. They use it during their interview process, and it's one consolidated, cohesive piece of technology that has been trained on. So there's a cost to that as well, that every officer there actually knows how to use this piece of technology. It's in the cars, it's in the building. Their court officers use it, their detectives use it. So operationally, it's part of their day-to-day, almost every day, if not every day.
If I could just add one more thing to that, this is something that would eventually tie into a project that we're looking into, which is body worn cameras. In that particular system, we received a recent estimate, and that's something that we plan on applying for a capital request down the line. It's probably in excess of $500,000 for body worn camera for that system, and that would directly tie into this WatchGuard system, or this Motorola system that we are looking to purchase.
Questions? Bob's hand is up, and Melissa, maybe take it back down so I don't miss any hands.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I did want to say that the out year request, I did put that, like I was telling you, that I hadn't updated the capital projects forecast, but the out year request is the things that are coming in now. So while it's not on the draft that you guys have in your packet, that out year request for body worn cameras will be in the next iteration, along with a few other things where, as we talk to departments and they talk about their out years, when I had submitted the draft to you guys originally, we had not concentrated on the out years, but now as we're, getting everyone online, we're addressing those out years so that you'll have a better list. I think I'll have an updated one for next meeting. Just because Chief Ting brought that one up, and there's a couple other projects like that the out years have been put in for.
Bob.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is, can we phase this in any way? In other words, are some of the cameras themselves, fairly new or capable of tying into the the new software system? And or do we have to buy everything all at once?
Yeah.
Secondly, how long will the system that Motorola provides be supported? Do you know? I mean,
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So I've been employed with the town for about 20 years, and this technology has been in place for most of my career, if not all my career here. I'll just start there. That the police department was really forward thinking. There's not too many law enforcement agencies that go back that many years that have this tech. But to answer your question directly, it can't be done, piece by piece. It's basically a rip and replace. It needs to be ripped out. It's no longer under support, and there's a cost there, both in human resources when it comes to IT staff, and just trying to fix it. They're just trying to find parts are not available. The software is not also under support, so there's really no way to fix like the server end where the video is stored without that software support. In the current quote that we have now, there's 5 years of support built into that.
and then how much would it be then after 5 years?
Well, that's a great question. We have the 5-year outlook. We don't have anything beyond that. I mean, one option is we keep it running with what we have, but it's probably not the best path forward. But I can look into that, Sean. I don't know if it's on that quote, but I didn't see out year after 5.
And just to build on Bob's, is the whole system needs to be replaced after 5 years, or parts of it start to go?
No. After 5 years, we would likely get pricing for both software and warranty maintenance. And I can look into the quote and give you an estimate in a minute about what that would look like. But to answer the question, we didn't have year 6, 7, or 8 built into that quote.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a one-time, it's a one-time thing now. They will basically guarantee they'll support it up to 5 years, but the expectation is that it would live beyond that. As what they have in a lot of the vehicles now are 10, 12 years old. So I would expect that it would continue to last for, I think 10 years with paying for maintenance on it is not unreasonable.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sean. Yeah, historically it has.
For this, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just
and then the
say
hope,
something.
yeah.
If I could just add, I mean, this current system that we have has lasted for 20 years. And I would guess that if the company was still in business, we would still probably be able to use it. And if it wasn't for the fact that they folded under it and sold out to Motorola, and Motorola made all the changes, and we would probably still be using the system.
I see Bridget and then Nat.
My question is just about the 2 different prices I saw in the projection at 195 and then here at 250. And I didn't see like if there was a quote or an invoice attached to the document. So I'm wondering like what the price difference was about.
I think the initial, when we initially submitted it, it was, we had a quote for 195, and then we got a more recent quote, which bumped it up to 250,000, and then we just received another quote today to try and confirm that, and I think Sean or Bill might have that information.
Yeah, so I went through that. The quote wasn't exactly for in-car cameras per se, but I added it up quickly and it came up to around 225,000. But that was what I came when I totaled that quote up for the in-car videos. That's about where it came. So it's very close to that $250,000 mark.
Thank you. Nat.
Oh, yes, thanks. Just a bigger picture here. I wasn't on the committee last year, but looking at the report from last year, it looked like there was a records maintenance system that was deferred last year and looked like it was being planned for FY26. Now I see that's listed under FY27. But just in terms of kind of priorities, Chief Ting, can you talk about the records management system and this video system in terms of priorities overall?
Yeah, I'm gonna defer that to Captain Young, if you don't mind stepping in
Okay,
and talking a
great.
little bit about that. You know, our records management system is outdated and certainly we've looked into some companies. Ron?
Thank you, Chief. So I think the short answer, sir, is I think the video is more important, and that was one of the reasons, because of the lack of support and how that is expiring. I mean, our current records management system is very dated. We've had it on board. We took it on board in shortly after the beginning of the millennial, so 2001, 2002. It's about 25 years old. We have, and again, the short answer is some of that support is also evaporating as well. That company's been sold many, many times. At the time, it was a very robust records management system, but as we know with technology, it really starts to evaporate rather quickly, and it's just a matter of time within the next couple of years when the current company that owns Foursquare will just not support this records management system at all. So I think that was Chief Ting's way last year of thinking forwardly and planning for what the future would look like. But in terms, that's a very long answer. My apologies for that. The short answer, I think the need for the video system is dire, whereas the records management system is on the horizon. But we're certainly able to continue to operate with the system we currently have.
Yeah, and I can second what Ron says because I'm deep into that technology as well, and Ron is right on point.
Any other questions? And thanks, Nat, because I had noticed also that we postponed it 1 year and it's postponed again. So it's sitting there for FY27. So there's one more, Melissa, correct? Or is that it?
Nope, there's one more. So this is for a in-car mounted speed radar units, which I know nothing about. So I turn it over to you guys.
So what these are built-in radar units for specifically to gauge speed for motor vehicles. And I'll tell you one thing, one of the number one complaints that we receive throughout town is traffic issues, and certainly speed is on top of that list. So we utilize these in-car mounted speed radar units on a daily basis. And currently, the models that we have are 25 years or more. They're just outdated, and they're beginning to fail. And every single one of them, before we utilize them, they have to be calibrated. And if they're not calibrated correctly, then they are not useful to us. We have to be able to swear in a court of law that these instruments are calibrated and that they are accurate and that they're correct, because they are gauging people's speed and we are enforcing and acting upon it. And if it's inaccurate, then we are really misleading the public and doing the public a disservice. So we need to update our in-car mounted speed radar unit fleet per se. And so that's why we have requested for this project cost to replace them. However, with that being said, I'm sure one of the questions would be, can we replace them as we go? And we certainly can. This isn't an all or nothing, is not an all or nothing type of request. Certainly that $31,000 would be able to replace all of them all at once. We would appreciate that. However, this is something that could be piecemealed.
Committee, turning it back to hands. Lee.
Yeah, I have a question. It's more kind of general because this is only my second year on JCPC and I feel still very new. Is it typical in the town, not just in Amherst, but in the world of town financing, to run municipal institution, the infrastructure for municipal institutions until they're in their death throes before they get replaced. I mean, that seems to be a theme that, you know, we're here because we're at the end of the line, and in many instances, the systems we have are so old that the companies no longer exist, or the only person who could repair them died, or parts have to be, you know, fabricated by hand. And so it just, maybe that's just the way municipalities run, and it's a statement of my ignorance, but I'm sort of shocked, that's all.
I would say from a technology perspective, we try and squeeze as much juice out of everything as we can, and it's really just when we come to ask to replace something, it's the end of its life, and we've gotten everything we can out of it, and
in no
so we're
way
trying-
was my question at all critical.
No, I
The
didn't
police
take it
department.
that way.
I mean, I just think like it's like waiting to, if I were living in a house where I thought in the next rainstorm my bedroom would be inundated, I wouldn't let my roof get to that place. But maybe towns just can't. That's the nature of the tight budgeting process that most towns have to go through. I don't know.
I can just say for us, from our perspective, is that, you know, I concur with Sean that we try and utilize every piece of equipment till you can't anymore. But the problem is that these items that we're requesting are essential. So when they break down, it takes so long to replace them or to allocate the funds for it that it becomes a detriment. So that way we try to get ahead of it. But we do try to squeeze as much out of that tube of toothpaste that we can.
Thank you.
So I see, Melissa, if you can take the display down, I see your hand is up and Bob's hand is up.
So I don't know what Bob was going to say, but I would say that not just in municipalities here in Massachusetts, but certainly the municipalities I've been here in Massachusetts, and I think nationally, deferred maintenance of infrastructure of all kinds is an issue, and it's an issue that we're dealing with here in Amherst. And what happens is there's competing needs for what is operational and to supply the services, the people, the services themselves, and then the infrastructure required to do that. And we have a tendency to say, well, this is all we have. So, you know, the chief said earlier today, and I know that Jeremiah is going to talk about, you know, the buildings, to your point, you know, the roof is leaking. We know that in several of the buildings here in town. And we wouldn't wait that long for ourselves, but we're expected to be careful with the taxpayer dollars. And so we try our best to stretch the dollar. And sometimes that that decision is penny wise, pound foolish. But we've come to a point, especially this year, I mean, it's on the front of every newspaper for every community, you know, what do we prioritize? And I think that's, you know, what you're going to see through this experience is unfortunately not uncommon, but you know, that's where the frustration is of, you know, we know better, we know we need to fund these things, but it, you know, one is a sacrifice of something else, and there's never a good choice.
Bob, and then Bridget.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that you know, I'm 72 years old, and when I was a kid, we didn't have any of this technology. I mean, you know, we are in a technology age, we're in a digital age, and as much as the technology helps us day to day, it gets obsolete and it has to be replaced. And if you look at the school budget, the school request, there's a lot of a big line in there for technology, for computers. we're giving, I think someone mentioned it yesterday, that, and certainly, Sean Mangiano mentioned it at MMA, that, you used to be able to buy textbooks and use them for 10 or 20 years. And now you have to buy subscriptions and you have to renew them every year. And so you have to pay the companies. It's a very different model than when I was a kid. So I think we have to adjust to that. On the flip side, though, the town only has so much revenue, and we have to manage within the revenue that we have. And so that's why we have to make hard decisions about these things and try to prioritize and try to put the money towards the things that matter the most. So, we're asking questions, but it doesn't mean that we're not sympathetic or empathetic to the situation facing the police department and the facilities and everybody in the town. So anyway, it's just not easy, but we are in this sort of technology, we're in the digital age, and there are going to be costs that we incur because of that.
Bridget.
You're muted.
Thanks. I was just gonna speak to Lee's point. Like the municipal budgets are in a situation where literally the wheels are falling off. My son was on a school bus that the tire fell off on a field trip, and it was on the side of the road. And we closed a school building this week because the roof collapsed, and then there had to be asbestos remediation, and kids are at the middle schools with Chromebooks that can't be replaced, but their textbook is on it. So I think that's sort of the situation we are in. And my questioning about the cars, and I understand they're well used, is that, that they feel very, very new compared to some of the lines we see in other town departments for vehicles, especially, even the schools where we have a busload of kids sitting with no tire, that type of thing. So I just concur with what Bob said is, if we could, we'd give everybody everything, but that's not the reality we're in funding wise.
Lee, do you have something specific to the request? Because we also have a whole.
Okay, I could continue this discussion, but I won't. I'll just take my hand down.
Because I think we're about to hear about buildings. So are there any other questions? The one I had that's not related to your request is we had a series of resident requests, some of which were traffic calming and blinking lights. And I don't know whether the police department had a chance to review those yet, so I'm not putting you on the spot. But when DPW comes, we were going to ask them about them because we're going to have to make a recommendation. So Melissa, maybe it could be coordinated that we get a joint response on. There were several that were, a blinking light to tell you what your speed is. A couple were crosswalks. So that I think it's a police plus DPW set of issues in terms of, what's the bigger picture. Yeah.
Right. And I think one was lighting too. Lighting in a
one was lighting, exactly. It was street lights on Dana. I think it was Dana, a dark street with no street lights. So I'm not asking you right now, but maybe there's a way where we could at least get a joint look at these and how they fit. So I know we've been asking as a committee, but also as a town, for traffic calming, crosswalks, lighting, some sort of master plan on which streets need them the most. But these came in again from a variety of places around town. So I'm not asking you right now. I'm just suggesting DPW. I think you have them listed, Melissa, for the March 19th.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there can be, a part carved out of that meeting to talk specifically about that set.
So if I sent you those requests a few weeks ago, Chief, and I don't know if you've had a chance to review them, but if you're not available on the same day that the DPW is. If you just want to give me a response, I'm happy to relay it as to how you guys think that fits in with your priorities for the community. You know,
Exactly. So I won't ask you necessarily to come back. It's just more though you've had input into whatever DPW's responses are.
Yeah, I mean, I can probably answer that question right now for you. I mean, certainly we are on board with that. Any type of traffic calming measures, a lot of it has to do with technology, you know, is something within our wheelhouse. And that's something that we support 100%. Again, just to reiterate, one of the biggest complaints that we get, and I'm sure it falls on your table too, Kathy, is that, and certainly with all of our other town councilors, is that traffic is an issue, you know, speed is an issue. Those are the number one complaints. So anything that we can do to try and help that effort, we support that 100%.
Thank you. So I'm not seeing any other hands, so I want to thank you all, the team, very much for coming today. And also the offer that on 31,000, it does all the cars, but you could cut it down. I mean, 31,000 seems like such a bargain if we can do them all on the radar, you know, so seeing numbers that aren't in the hundreds of thousands is always terrific from my perspective. So thank you
Yeah,
very much.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, you know, and to what Bob had talked about earlier, and I totally agree. I mean, I'm one of those people that finally got a cell phone when I was 32 years old. And now you're seeing kids at 5 years old with cell phones. So it's, yeah, quite a change. But you know, the items that we're asking for are things that are certainly pertinent for our jobs. So we understand the state that we're in, you know, budget wise, but certainly the items that we're requesting are things that are a necessity for us. So we appreciate any input. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for giving us so generously of your time. So you are all free to leave, or if you want to hear Jeremiah's presentation, you're free to stay.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you, Jeremiah.
Yeah.
You're
Have
on your
fun.
own.
Yeah. Take care, everybody. Thanks for everyone's time.
All right, thank you.
so I don't have anything to share as far as documentation, but I know that Jeremiah and Rob Mora have presented some things to us internally that are, you know, sort of bigger picture as to the whole scope of the landscape. And they've done a lot of work over the past, I'd say, year to two to get a real understanding of the conditions of all municipal owned buildings. And this move to a one-line request allows them to take all of that information and all of the deferred maintenance, to your point, Lee, that is here in the city, and then set priorities based on, you know, highest and greatest need, and then being able to pivot for an emergency that they'd hoped to stretch for one more year, and then something came up and they weren't able to do that. So that's my summary of what I've heard from them, and I'll hand it over to the professionals.
So
I
welcome.
think your mic is up.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, I would say if you sat through these JCPC meetings with me over the course of the last few years, you'd see some changes. And one of the big changes was the numbers were growing. Last year, we started seeing some larger numbers, and that was, we'll say, to prepare you for what we're presenting now, essentially. We had put up or put in some requests last year for 500,000, say, for roofs. In past years, we would have 200,000 or 250,000 for all buildings, interior, exterior. And this is a sort of path that we want to take. And I did put together a little presentation Kathy, as I always do.
That'd be great. That'd be great. And if you could also speak to how, what you're proposing now, but how you've used the money that was allocated.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so I
And
I-
just
I-
as Jeremiah is bringing it up, for people who haven't been on JCPC, what's been happening is it started to be bundling instead of saying, 10,000 for this and 14 for that. It's a bundle that doesn't say which building. It allows more flexibility. And my understanding is it's now $1 million is what's penciled in.
Sorry. Okay. So here's my wonderful piece that I always start with. Our facilities department. So here's I wanted to give you all an example of the approach. So over on the left-hand side was the approach that we used to take. So as you can see, we would have very specific buckets of money for, it could be smaller projects or maybe larger projects. So we have building envelope repairs, $200,000, exterior maintenance at town hall, $35,000, interior maintenance, town hall, 25. Security, windows, and the police station's chiller. So some of the challenges that we would have is we would get into some of these projects, and it may be a building envelope project, and we discover something, or we have some cost overrun. Maybe the project changed a little bit, but that $35,000 is no longer going to help us. We need some additional funding. If all of the other funds are spent down, I really it becomes a bit of a barrier. When money's allocated just for interior, it's hard to get it reallocated for the exterior. So what we're trying to do is over the past few years is create just larger buckets of money that we're saying, this is what we're going to do with. We still have a system, we still have a prioritization, but we need these bigger buckets of money to allow us to address all of the issues that we see, but also the ones that we don't see that come up over the course of the year. So there again, there's a reduced flexibility. There's coordination challenges and operation disruption because again, if we're only picking a little pieces of the building apart and doing those repairs, it's impactful to the operations in the community that we serve. There's those potential cost overruns, and again, it extends that duration of the project. So on the right-hand side, this is my two asks. So the one big ask was $1 million for all buildings, interior, exterior, and accessibility. This allows us to look at the town as a whole and say, what is our priority? And then address that priority in a meaningful way. We put roofs on last year, and that was 500,000. Roofs are extremely expensive, and especially when you're dealing with the size in the different roofing types that we are using. So 500 would be wonderful. Having that $1 million makes it feasible. So having this larger bucket of money provides us more flexibility. We still maintain that systematic approach to our capital projects. It reduces mobilization costs because we're looking at one big project where we get a greater number of things done. And it eliminates some of the different inefficiencies that you have with starting and restarting projects. So
Jeremiah, can you stay on that page and tell us why Bangs is on the list?
Sure. Rob, are you on? And would you like to speak about the bangs, or if not, I will.
Sure.
Unless you're going to come back to it. So we just allocated $2.8 million to banks.
If it's okay, we can come back to it and
Okay.
let
we can
Jeremiah
come
go through
back.
his slides.
So you're going to focus, Jeremiah, just on the million, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, between last year and this year, we'll say I'm saying calendar year, we had a comprehensive facility condition and assessment done on 10 of our municipal buildings. It include energy audits, laser scanning, and measurements. This was a very much needed tool. The last FCA that we had was from 2016, and it wasn't nearly as comprehensive as the one that we have now. Like our accessibility plan that we had done a number of years ago, this provides us with a format and a pathway to make sure that all of our buildings are taken care of the way they need to be, that we aren't having a leaky roof, and that we're catching things before they crumble, essentially. So the way that we want to approach it with this larger bucket of money is look at the building envelope in sight, primarily roofs, roof drainage, exterior facades, entrance and exterior doors and windows, accessibility compliance, driveways, sidewalks, and walking paths. So just kind of clicking through so you see, this is what we're saying. We're saying this is how we're going to look at it. We're looking at the roof right now. This is one piece. And we want to approach the building in such a manner. We're going to have a look at this roof. What is it going to cost us to replace or repair if we can? You know, is this our number one priority, or is it the facade? Are we looking at the masonry? All that's the sacrificial mortar. Are we looking at the windows? You know, or do we have a leaky building that's not very weather resistant? But water seepage, water damage is one of the most devastating for buildings. And then we're going to look at everything around the building, the accessibility of the building, the approach of the building. How do we serve our community? So that is how we're going to look at it at each of our buildings, and that's initially. From there, if we've determined that we're fairly good on roofs, we're fairly good on facades, maybe windows and doors and some compliance or accessibility compliance is good, we'll open up those buildings. And then we're going to start looking at our sustainability goals. We have insulation, weatherization, electrical infrastructure, which will include EV charging solutions for a lot of those fleet EV vehicles that we've been requesting or others have been requesting. We have our decarbonization goals. We have our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, includes HVAC, air conditioning systems. This is a highlight. This is something that we need to work towards. We need to work towards our decarbonization goals. But we can't if roofs are leaking. We can't if windows don't close properly and buildings are poorly insulated. If the thermal envelope of the building is no good, then it really does us no good to update these other items. We're looking at vertical lifts and elevators, the domestic water distribution, and electrical services and distribution. And then if all of that's good, we can start filling in. So now we have, say we have a project that ended up, we added that $1 million, we spent $850,000 on a larger project, we got a roof done. But we also know now, like other departments that are our partners over at APD, we have technology challenges as well. It could be with fire alarm detection, notification, and suppression. So this is our life safety or in emergency systems. Those are starting to meet end of life. And we need to update those because they're no longer being able to be programmed or changed and don't support new, they're no longer code compliant based on new code. As we make these changes to the building and we make these meaningful repairs to the building, it will trigger different code compliance and accessibility compliance requirements. So we spend some money over here and we make this building a lot better for our occupants and the community that it serves. But we also have these other requirements that we have to take care of. So and it will trigger those other initiatives. And having that larger bucket of money will help support each of those projects and the changes that it may happen once we start digging into them. And so that is my fancy screen share. So I'm going to stop my screen share, but I will bring up some of the projects that we have done. Right. So some of the more notable large projects that the facilities department has either provided some assistance for, some oversight, or accomplished. We have the replacement of the Amherst Police Department roof. We have replacement of the Amherst Police Department chiller. We have support at the Amherst high school's track and field, Fort River Elementary School, Jones Library. We have the Bangs Community Center renovations, the Kendrick Park restrooms, some smaller projects that we provided assistance, oversight, or accomplished. We have LED lighting upgrades at North and Central Fire. So North is almost entirely now on LED fixtures, so that'll help bring those operational costs down. Envelope repairs at North Fire, flooring replacements to help create a training center in Central Fire. Head house repairs at Boltwood Garage, electrical service installation at Hickory Ridge. We did some EV charging stations over at APD, working with AFD to add some charging stations over there. Expanded building access control and security, added water bottle stations to buildings, elevator upgrades for code compliance, bridge and trail work at Hickory Ridge, and envelope repair at the DPW building. So that's sort of a synopsis of all of the different fun projects we did.
Questions? I have one. Nat, go ahead, because I have one looking at last year's list.
Okay, thanks very much. That sounds like a great approach to have a bucket that you can use to address, the things that are needed the most. But I'm in my first year on this committee, and I'm just thinking, like, how does this actually work? It would be very helpful, and maybe you don't work this way, but is there a kind of a priority list? So kind of the top sort of 10 things, top 20 things, and then you would kind of go down that list and see what you could do, or how is that developed, or do you not know that a few months before the fiscal year begins, or how does that process come about?
We are still working on developing, and we want to have that list to go to. So having done that facilities condition and assessment, we have really wonderful documents. Each building is 70, 80 pages long. and that it's just a lot of information to go through. But those documents are still in a draft form. We are working with the company to finalize and to sort of make them more accurate before we start distributing some of that information out there. But those are going to be our guides to creating that list of the highest priority items and really be our focus. When we have the funds, we can focus on those priorities.
I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'll ask my question. So last year, you had $500,000. Last year, meaning the year
Yes.
we're living in, you had $500,000 called roof.
Yes.
You said last year that in FY 26, you'd need another 500 and another 55. So you were looking for 555 for all of the above. And you, just so everyone knows, Jeremiah listed a bunch of the police, chiller, those were all separate items. And I'm just looking at the bundled items. So the bundle has gone from 555 to $1 million was what I observed. And then looking in 27, 28, and 29, it goes from $1 million to $1.5 million to $2 million to $2 million to $2 million. And Nat's question is what's the highest priority in each of these? So I'd like to know what happened to the 500 for something called roofs, because that was our first bundle without knowing which roofs, Nat. We just said, here's some money for something called roofs. We didn't call it roofs and anything else. So, so the question I have also is, do we need to go all the way up to $1 million? If you don't have your priority lists, could we be at 600,000 or 700,000, something less than $1 million as we start to bundle? Yeah.
Can I answer some of that?
Sure.
And I'll certainly have Rob
Sure.
and Jeremiah, but the number started at 2. And when you get into those assessments that they have, the cost of repairing 10 to 14 buildings, depending on which buildings you're counting, that Jeremiah has under his umbrella, the cost alone, he'll tell you, of repairing the roof of this building takes all of, I think, what did you guys tell me? It would be $1 million for half the roof.
Yeah, it's a $2 million, about a $2 million replacement for just town hall.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get a sense about the last year bundle, how it was spent, and then the new bundle. And then my other question is related to when you say 10 buildings, did it include Crocker Farm School? Did you do a laser and everything else on that elementary school?
We did not do Crocker. That was not a part of the initial 10 buildings.
Okay.
We did look at Wildwood, and we did look at portions of the middle school. As far as school buildings.
Yeah, since we won't have Wildwood, I won't talk about Wildwood, in terms of the school we plan to continue to have is Crocker of the 3. So I'll wait for other questions on this. Bob.
Yeah, I generally support this approach to doing the facilities management, but there is a lack of transparency from our perspective, in the sense that we don't know exactly what you're going to do. And, we don't know that what you do, I mean, without, questioning your professional integrity, but we don't know what you're going to do. And so I'm reminded at a project I did years and years and years ago, which was to projectize the cleanup of the America's nuclear weapons complex. And Congress was writing a check to the Department of Energy for $6.5 billion a year. And they said, what are we getting? What are we buying, for this? And how long are you going to we have to spend it? So I don't I'm not sure, you're obviously not prepared to say that, but there is a concern here that there's a lack of transparency and we don't know exactly what the money is going to be used for. And so, and whether $1 million is enough or $1.5 million should do it. I mean, it's really hard to get our hands around this without having some more documentation about what is intended to do, what the priorities are, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I realize you're not there yet, but it's very hard for us to know if this is the right amount, to prioritize without knowing what it is we're going to get for $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. So I'm not sure that there's an answer to it. I mean, I do support this idea. It makes sense from a project perspective, but there's got to be a little bit more transparency, at least from my perspective, so I understand what it is that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the major priorities, if not the number one priority, would be looking at the town hall's slate roof. And that is that $1 million may get me half of a roof. And that's the reality, unfortunately. I have have estimates from one of the local specialists, slate specialists, that said this is a $2 million job. And it's probably a $2 million job if I could pay $2 million for them to come over here, set up staging around the entire building and take care of the entire roof for me. But when I say we're going to mobilize this big system, this big construction site for only half, I'm probably going to pay about $1.3 million for that half. And then when I get to the front, I'm going to pay 1.5. So my $2 million is really much more than that. And then we're also where I have to have engineering. There's engineering and architectural oversight and those costs. And it's just it is, the cost climbs so quickly, which means that these asks get spent so very fast.
Lee and Bridget and I have a follow-up.
Okay. Maybe I missed something. I thought, Kathy, that you asked what was the $500,000 last
I
year
did.
spent on, and
Yeah.
did I miss the answer?
I didn't hear it.
Okay. So that's my question. I guess I'm just pleased that I didn't miss it, but I'd be curious. Thank you.
Some of it is, I would just say, capacity. I listed off quite a few projects, and it is a relatively small. My department is a relatively small department, and it is just about capacity. If I'm not working with engineering and architectural firms to develop all of these documents, it's Rob, Dave, it's procurement, it's working with accounting. We're doing it. We're doing that all, and it's to do a smaller job just to get it contracted could take 3 months. So then you look at some of these bigger jobs when it does require design work. It just takes quite a bit of time. I have and I'm working on awarding a contract for a roof design for one of our water treatment buildings. And I would say for roof systems, that has been that was the priority when we first were looking at that 500, because it seemed like this is a roof that we could get done with that amount of money. Since then, I started developing the work, the documentation, and started talking with designers about the town hall's roof. Town hall is another one of, if not the highest priority. It's 1A, And $500,000 gets me meaningful repair in a lot of areas, but it doesn't get us what we need, which would be pulling off the slate and actually getting a weather tight membrane underneath that slate and getting slate reinstalled on top of that. So there's been roof work, but not necessarily. I can't say that I have a project that I can present and say this is what we did with that.
Bridget?
I can say though that to any capital projects are allowed to roll from year to year. So if he has a project that, you know, maybe he couldn't get off the ground because he only had 500,000 and the actual cost of doing the project is, you know, would you say $1.3 million to do half the town hall roof? If the other million was to come along, then he could get this project going and do that half a roof. And then maybe because the bucket is not restrictive to roofs, if there's an extra 100,000 or 200,000, there might be some soffit fixes, or, you know, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
you know, the things that you'll find out when you start to peel back the roof that are extra in addition to the roof. And that's why they're trying to do this sort of envelope approach. So I looked it up. The 500,000 is mostly still available, but I think it's a matter of having a project that fits within 500,000 or that can be added to one of these larger buckets so that they can, as the costs rise or they prioritize things and other things come up, there's movement and ability to accomplish it.
Thanks, Melissa. That was the answer I was looking for. So Bridget, so there's 500 sitting to be drawn on, which they don't have to be spent all in the year that we allocated.
They don't, no.
Bridget?
Yeah, thanks. I guess I just would concur with a lot of what I'm hearing is the main thing that I'm hearing from my constituents from school committee is like, hey, town is building this, you know, brand new common, town is doing X, town is doing Y, and yet, you know, the schools look like this, or, you know, Proctor's got leaks and the school's closed down for X or that type of thing. And I feel like having a list and making sure the prioritized are distributed in a way that's fair and that is explainable and is something that I can share with people in a way that makes sense, you know, so that, you know, to sort of take the temperature down and be able to be very clear with people. Well, I fully understand the approach. I think also what the approach is to priorities and how those are made would be important. It's, you know, it's interesting that, you know, Crocker Farm, which the schools are saying needs replacing soon, isn't even on the list. And so not really a question, but just that. And then you said 10 buildings, and when I make a list, if the schools are on the list, great, the elementary schools. And if they aren't, then like 4 of the buildings maybe aren't being used or would be replaced, like Southeast Street School, South Campus, DPW, and Fire. And so then how much is going towards each building, I guess? And even I know people are saying like $900,000 for a chiller or different things that maybe they're not. These are the types of things that have people asking us about the fairness of the process.
So Bridget, what I have said in many meetings is that the school department operates its own facility department and their own capital projects, and they have not requested those projects. And I believe that they may too also have a capacity issue. You know, they just need the people together in order to do that. And so they might, and they will be here. I can't remember if it's next week or the week after, but that's something that you would bring to them. And, you know, in fairness to them, they have a new facilities manager, so who just started. So, you know, this is what, you know, that person has inherited. So, you know, it's hard for us to defend the priorities if the request hasn't been made. And you know, from the school department. you know, like, are we prioritizing town over schools? Well, that's not in Jeremiah's or Rob's, you know, that's not in their area. That's these funds that they're asking for, the buildings that they're responsible for are not those buildings. They have their own team.
Being that for whatever decisions are made, to understand really clearly and publicly the decisions behind them so that it's equitable and that I can explain it. It would be super helpful.
Absolutely. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that that's a question that we need to ask of them. We can't set their priorities for them. That's not our role, to tell them what their priorities are. It's not my role to tell them what their priorities are.
And the very final thing I would say is like, is there some of this that is operating or is it all truly capital?
This is all truly capital.
I had a couple, I think, comments that build on the questions that have been asked. I think our challenge would be, why is it $1 million? You know, give us some justification. We don't really have, Nat asked for highest priority, because I don't think if the schools came to us and said, we want $1 million, and we'll tell you later what we're going to do with it, that for capital, and we know roofs are leaking and stuff. I'm just saying that we need some more justification on, and when I say, I like the bundling idea, I think we all like that. And you know, why not 800,000? You know, so I'm not saying go way back down. Then my second comment is, if you think town hall's in the mix, Community Preservation Act money is available for town hall because it's a historic building. And so we have a separate place we could be looking at that roof. Similarly, Jones years ago drew on some of it for slate roof repairs. You know, so I don't think it, particularly for the slate roofs on a historic building, it all needs to come out of our capital budget. So just trying to think of what else, and you know, Lee asked earlier, do we wait till the roof has failed? You know, is the town roof leaking? Is it, you know, so it's, we just had work done on our slate roof. We have a 1810-ish or 1820, because the town's not quite sure when it was built. And we just needed big pieces of it repaired. They said the roof was actually in pretty good shape. So just in terms of thinking through this, something more to justify it. Is what I think you're hearing the ask for from the committee. Some not that once we look through each of the documents, and I would also like to know what the 10 buildings were. You don't need to tell me right now, but just in terms of giving us back what buildings you looked at. Because I would not think we should be putting much money into Wildwood, for example, you know. So I'm going to take my hand down, but I think that's just a, for the next time, or feed it back through, not that you come back, but feed something more back through Melissa for the committee to be considering. So I think, Rob, you were going to handle Bangs.
Sure. So there's a $500,000 request added for Bangs. This is something that was decided following the recent meetings where we were very excited to get support for the $2.8 million allocation for a renovation project that is almost entirely systems related, with you know, potentially a couple of alternates that could be added if you know, our bids are more competitive than our cost estimates reflect at this time. So you know, during that process, the town manager, you know, mentioned a couple things. He mentioned, you know, we were going to make an effort to include a fitness center for the senior center. And he mentioned a FY26 request to continue supporting the building with improvements. So when we talked about this, you know, what that might look like, there are a number of things. You know, one item that we're working on right now, you know, working to get into design, is to bring the building entirely off of fossil fuels with, a boiler replacement and a few pieces of the remaining pieces of the HVAC system that are not part of the project that we currently have designed. That's a project that we would like to couple with a decarbonization grant. So that would be, as an example, would be a $500,000 grant that we would have some match to. Our estimates are in the $800,000 to $900,000 range to do the full project. So that's one item. And, this all kind of goes back to Jeremiah's approach that he detailed to you on how we're first looking at roofs and envelopes. And then if there isn't available funding, there's an available project for whatever reason, we don't get bids on a project that we put out through procurement, that we can shift and we can go to, our next priority, which is energy efficiency and climate action and fulfilling our sustainability goals where we can. And that's one example of it. Now that grant might not be awarded, that grant might not be available, that project may not happen if it was funded that way. So we would then want to have other options available. And, this is all in the kind of the spirit of let's do more for the Bangs Community Center, for the senior center. We certainly felt like there was support for that and an interest in that. And if that is the case, we have conceptual design, to really start to make the senior center function better. So there would be physical improvements to the space. There'd be accepting perhaps the alternates that weren't accepted in the project that we're working on now and completing that portion of it. There are a number of things that could be done. We have a part of that project. We have the facilities department's commitment to working on part of the list of accessibility issues that need to be resolved. We are also seeking a variance from the state to have the kitchen remain as part of this process. That may not be awarded, and we may have to demo the kitchen or do something different there to be in compliance. So we've got all these options, with the Bang Center, that, any one or couple of those, far exceed, $500,000 in value. So this was, I think, phase one as we presented it a couple of weeks ago, moving into phase two, which could be, I think right in front of us is either going to be completing the HVAC system or moving into some of the improvements, mostly for the senior center.
So questions, I have several, but I'm looking to see whether others have them. So having
I'm just
read through,
out because I've got school committee meeting right now at 5:30, but thanks all.
right. Okay, did anyone else put their hand up? Because I would like to call on other people before I speak.
I want to hear your questions, Kathy.
Okay, so when we reviewed, when Bangs came to us at the council for the use of free cash, there was a systems report that had been done by an engineering firm. And one of the things they said, and then was said to us, is the boiler system is in pretty good shape. So not urgent in terms of a repair. And what it did cover was redoing the HVAC, all the airflow, make comfort zones, fire alarm, ADA. So there were a lot of code upgrades to the building that were in the 2.8. It strikes me that an additional 500,000 when we're on this tight of money, that isn't a list of high priority urgent, doesn't feel right on Bangs. And so what you listed, Maury, yes, there may be another phase, but it didn't occur to me it would be in the same year we're doing 2.8. And just so people know, we spent about 300,000 for the design of it, so the 2.8 had another 300 in it of ARPA money. So we've had a big adjustment. So I think I was surprised to see it on the list, is I guess what I would say, because some of these it would be nice to have. And then what we were told with the boiler is if we had a whole new airflow system ready, that could be integrated with a boiler, that we thought we could get grant money for the boiler itself, the decarbonization, not that we would have to have seed money to get the boiler. So we were comfortable saying, okay, there could be grant money. So it feels like this is premature, I guess is the way I would do, with a lot of other urgent, sort of more urgent capital needs. It doesn't feel as urgent. You know, it's not, Lee asks, is the roof leaking? But it's not, you know, this isn't the roof leaking situation. This is more a, you know, Bang's roof isn't on the list here. It's small things to make the building more user-friendly or address some unmet needs of the users, but not that the building itself is in dire straits. So I guess those are my comments on this. I was surprised to see it on the list. And I'll wait for
Yeah,
the other comments.
Yeah, no, I understand. You know, I will say that there's no way to know how long or how good our boiler is. I mean, I think that's a, you know, a statement made in a report by an engineer who didn't do any type of performance testing on any equipment. We have no reason to think that it's going to fail tomorrow, but we never know when it's going to fail tomorrow. But that's not really the reason. But I just wanted to say that I wouldn't rely on that statement. You know, in that report, we've recently pressed the engineers on a number of items in the report to understand exactly what level of testing and performance, you know, evaluation they've done, and we, you know, we're learning how much, you know, assumption is made in their work, and when they move forward to present the options that they did. So, you know, this is really a decision we have to make. You know, are we going down this route of decarbonization? Are we seriously going to approach this? And if we are, we need to design it. We need to be prepared for the application to try to seek funding, and then be prepared to supplement it. And it kind of has to happen in that order. You know, a design for the system that we're looking at, that we're getting into, is, you know, going to be $60,000 to $80,000. You know, just to be prepared to seek the grant money that's available. And like I said, that's a $500,000 grant. We're evaluating cost estimates and know we're in the, you know, $800,000 to $900,000 range for the project. So just to give you an idea, you know, right or wrong, that was our approach, is that, you know, our next best thing to do in that building is to finish out the HVAC system, get off fossil fuels, and then from there we would be moving into, you know, more of the nice improvements that would, you know, better the experience for the seniors and all the users for that building. That was simply the approach, and it seemed like a good time. It's ideal with having a design team involved with the building. It's ideal when we're opening things up in so many places, and know what's going on, and have conceptual plans already laid out. Been working with the departments in the building, and, you know, have support for some of the ideas. So it was a good time for us to consider that if funding happened to be available, and that's, you know, how we put it out there.
So Rob, when you said 60 to 80, so $100K would be enough for designing what the replacement would look like, yes?
Yes.
In that, okay. That, I just want to make sure
and just to be clear,
you said 60 to 80 and I rounded it up to 100. But
well, right. No, I think we're, you know, we're not that high. I don't think we're going to reach 100. I think we're 60 to 80 for design with construction administration. You know, those are the estimates we're talking about right now. And we're trying to get that started with, you know, other sustainability money that we already have in place. So, you know, our plan was to work on design over the next couple of months. Be prepared to file an application whenever the next round becomes available, which we think will be, you know, sometime mid or late year, like it did last year. And, you know, if that, you know, was a successful effort, then we would have, you know, additional funds ready to go and complement and you know, follow with the project that we would be in the middle of. You know, we'd be in the middle of construction at that point.
And if I could just say, if it wasn't, clear from Rob's and Jeremiah's presentation, there is this sort of mobilization cost every time that we decide to start a project over, or we did a project piecemeal. We have to mobilize that project, rip things apart to put them back together again. And at some point, it just costs so much more to start over. And so when the building is open and we're doing things, that's the most economical time to make the improvements if they're on the horizon. And, if this is a priority for the town and it's part of, what we're going toward as a town, do we want to, do all these improvements to a building right now and then turn around and in 5 years, rip half of that out in order to create the opportunity to do the HVAC? And I'm probably overstating that, but
No.
there is some economy when you don't do a project piecemeal.
And Melissa, this is just not what we were told when we were looking at the 2.8. That was not at all the impression we were given, that we, we were actually, another counselor asked, if we do all this design, are we ready for the boiler? And the answer was yes, it will all be ready to link up, that, so we weren't being told that we're going to rip everything up and they're going to have to rip it up again. So
Yeah,
it's,
and we're not,
and-
sorry, we're not saying that. No,
Right.
I mean, I think generally what Melissa's saying, exists in a project, but not this one. What the Bangs project as designed that we asked and received funding for does everything. Let's just think about it. Everything outside of the boiler room throughout the building. That's the project that's designed and going to be built. This next step takes care of everything in the boiler room and equipment that'll be connected to it outside. That's, there is a very clean separation. There wouldn't be tearing anything open. And my comment about it's an ideal time to look at these other projects is because we have exposure. We have the ability to do the investigation and really look for the best solution while things are opened up, while we have design teams available at our disposal. That's the efficient part of a project like this. It isn't so much on the construction side, it's in the design and the planning side. And that's what we were looking at. But certainly what we said in the original presentation is true. There is no reconstructing that would be needed for any of the projects that we're considering for the Bank Center.
Oh, I just dominated that, but Bob was there for the original presentation too. We're both on finance, so we heard a longer and we had documents. So any other, I jumped right in, but in a I would say a non-supportive way, but with a smile. So any other questions on this? And, this is partly, I think my concern is partly the optics of it with the struggle we've got on the operating budget side, that we've argued that 10.5 is absolutely essential for capital. And then when things come in that seems like it's less urgent, that argument doesn't seem to hold as well, or, in terms of funds are tight everywhere. So it's also in that context. And I think, I'm just seeing whether we might have lost Bridget.
Yeah, she had to
Yeah,
go
Bridget.
for
Okay.
school committee meeting
Yeah, the
at
school
5:30.
committee.
So I have so I think we've done those two things. So I just have a few other comments to make that are more future looking on the next meetings that are coming up. Melissa has put together agendas for the 12th, the 19th, and the 26th, which from what I can see will cover most of the projects we're seeing on that list. So what I would suggest or request of everyone is, if there is a line item that you have questions on already, just seeing what it is, when you're looking in the past, if you can send them to me and I'll group them so I can get them to Melissa, and then she can be asking people to be prepared for these questions when we come to it, so whether it's on the schools or the DPW or there are other pieces of it when you look through it, so we didn't have enough time to do that for Jeremiah and Rob Moore this time, but it's easier for people to answer questions if they know, if they can anticipate they're going to have them. So that's just a request. And if you send them to me, I'll consolidate. So it doesn't have to be one person, then another. And then Melissa will get one list rather than a series. And then the other I wanted to mention is that I had I didn't know how long JCPC would go, but I have a conflict on the 2 weeks in April. So I wanted to see if we could move one of the April meetings, the 9th, to the 11th, which would be a Friday. And I'll send this out to everyone as a request on whether we can, instead of meeting Wednesday that week, Friday, and I'll give a bunch of time slots for, because I will be back by then, and Sarah Marshall will need to chair the April 2nd. But I think then we'll have enough time to have a good discussion on what we think about the projects that have been presented and what we want to write up in the report. So just be prepared on that Wednesday to see if that Wednesday could be a Friday instead. And I'll offer some morning hours or afternoon hours, just on switching that one meeting and I checked with Melissa and it works on her schedule to move it. So it's a question of whether it works on ours. So Jeremiah and Rob, you can stay for this or not, or we can just thank you very much if you have other things to do other than the last few minutes here.
Thank you.
Nat's hand is up also. So I didn't mean to cut you off, Nat.
Thanks. Just you talked about the next meeting, and as you know, I'll be away next week, and I didn't see anything on the website in terms of agenda. Just out of curiosity, what's being planned for next week that I'll miss?
So Melissa, do you want me to read them out? I printed
Sure.
them out actually.
Sure. I get confused on who's when. I just was glad to get everybody scheduled.
Okay, so what Melissa had sent me, as I think they were, formed for March 12th, it was Fire Department, Planning and Conservation, Sustainability, and Cherry Hill.
Yep. And I will change that order because Ray, for the his small project, it's a irrigation project, he wants to talk first because he has a conflict later in the meeting. So just so you know,
so
I'm gonna...
that's I'm not interpreting these necessarily as the order. And then the March 19th would be the school and DPW. So it's big in dollar.
Yeah.
Big in dollars. So that gets us through. I think it does get us through all the projects that have been listed. So what we won't have seen is the inventory update on vehicles, or
buildings too. I'll have that. I was working on it before this meeting, and I'm having challenges matching up the VIN numbers from one year to the next. So it was a little messy.
So we potentially, by the end of the 19th, will have gone through every project on the list. With submitting questions in advance, we'll have some answers to it. And so by the 20th.
And we'll have updated debt numbers by then too, because we're doing some borrowing work in the next few weeks.
Okay. So that's just
that's why I haven't updated that. I'm waiting because we'll have more accurate numbers in like 2 weeks.
So I took that and then I said, okay, then what happens on April 2nd? What happens on the 9th if we shift it to the 11th? And I can send this out to everybody once I find out whether the 11th is a go, because we need to have a final report, reviewing a final report and finalize it by April 16th at the latest, to be able to get it to the town manager, because his plan is due back on May 1st, but Melissa is a part of all of these, so he will be aware of what, if anything, we're recommending in terms of different pieces.
Do you want, I have been compiling as we went along here from the forms submitted, the summaries that are in the narrative report. Do you want that Next meeting? Like everything, I put them all in there as if they would all be approved, but I could not, you know what I mean? So do you want me to send you that and then you can redline, like if you decide to take off a project or something like that?
I think that would be helpful. So this is, if you look at last year's report, it's the one paragraph that says what the project is. So you don't have to look at the complicated form that people fill out. You know, and we don't have to look at it, but we have it so we can be looking at these pieces.
We want to make sure we get the right projects this time.
Yeah. Right. You know, and Nat, your hand is up. Okay. You know, so we have minute takers. The only one we don't have right now, Councilor Lord, is April 2nd. So if you can do minutes on April 2nd, I'm going to put your name next to minutes for April 2nd. But someone has signed up for each of the March 12th, the March 19th, and the March 26th meetings.
I am good for April 2nd.
Okay, that's great. And so people know our process. I said this last time, but Sarah did the minutes last time. I reviewed them and sent them to Melissa, so they'll get posted. So when we get to talking about what we want to do, you'll both have the minutes from the meeting and you'll have the recording if you want to look at it again. But we all can probably remember what's happening. But that will be, you know, what we go back and reference in terms of pieces. And Lee, I will send you the Word document that allows you to set this up for the minutes. You know, it's just
okay, although I use Google Docs, but
well, you can bring a Word document into Google Docs,
Okay.
which is exactly what Sarah did. She sent me hers in Google Docs and I was
Good.
able to download it.
perfect.
So is there any other question or comment? And again, if something occurred to you after today that you didn't ask, that now you're thinking about it, send it through me and then I'll get it to Melissa so we can get answers, or if we didn't get them today.
And so Kathy, just for me, if we're going to do all of the presentations, hopefully by, you know, mid-March-ish, and then so what's the format for the meetings after that?
I've got something really rough, but what we reserve time as we're going along. Sometimes as we're going along, we are suggesting, well, last year was different because it came in without doing what you've done on really paring it down. So we had to axe about $2 million worth to have the budget balance. But if, you know, those meetings will be, to what extent are we questioning a project? Are we thinking that the timing isn't right for it, or the level isn't right for it? That will be that discussion for our recommendation up at the top. You know, it'll be otherwise accepting all the projects, you know, with the exception of a few, and we can highlight them and what the discussion was about this and what we ended up recommending. So that's where our discussion is, the report that we're writing to the town manager as our recommendations. So an example of this would be a couple years ago, body cams were on the police list. And we decided it was premature to put them on the list. And there was also some discussion on a grant might be available for them. And they went off the list, and it was a big reduction that allowed something else to be cash capital rather than debt finance, because that was a big purchase. So, you know, your equivalent, Melissa, was behind the scenes saying, okay, if that's not there, maybe it's more money for roads. You know, that we could say allocate that money for roads. And just so everyone knows, when they look at roads, the 500,000 that's penciled in right now, that's the town cash. There's another 890 that is Chapter 90, about 890,000. That's Chapter 90 money that is also for roads. So that's not the only roads money we have, or and
the 500,000 that you just did.
Yeah, and so it's in addition to the draw on our money. So in the past has always shown up as a line item for roads, but it's from a different source. It's from it's from state money.
Mhm.
So when Guilford comes in, he's looking at more than just $500,000 for roads and the sidewalk money. There's another pot of money that he's drawing on. So I think it's 5:52, and I think we got through today's agenda. And I will send this really rough. I just copy and pasted what's coming up, Melissa. And if you want to move Cherry Hill up, I'll change the order and move it up more. So I didn't take it necessarily as the order. But that will be by the end of March 19th, we'll be through the projects. You know, other than looking at some of these summary documents.
Okay. Yeah, and so I, you know, certainly by the 26th, I'll have all the, you know, like I'll have the report, like as it was submitted last year, written to be, you know, redlined if you know, like it's not in balance right now. It's off, I think like 400 something $1,000. But you know, I can have all the details and then we can decide how what the priorities are.
Right, and you know, and just in the past, we haven't looked at year 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the 5-year plan. But if you look at 2, 3, 4, and 5, a couple of them are way out of balance. So we probably have time to make some comments about those. We won't necessarily be making recommendations, but we're 2 million, 3 million off in the next 2 years, given what the
Right.
pieces are.
So I have a question, I guess, about that is that's always going to be the case. Like
Yeah.
if you try and balance it now, you're just, you know, you're pretending that the project doesn't cost that much when we know that when it comes forward to now, we make, you know, really, you know, kind of uncomfortable decisions about what our priorities are and pretend like the roof isn't leaking.
Yeah.
But it is. So, you know, I guess that's my comment on that.
Yeah, no, but it's just, you know, looking at some of those line items, we could question some of the line items. There's $6 million in for Southeast Street intersections, for example. It's a big one DPW has for, and there's some question on whether it's going to cost that much, period. It's not that we might want to do something, but the timing of it. So I'm just saying, we don't get heavily into those years, but we can draw attention to anything we say that doesn't, you know, why is
Yeah.
this at that level?
So I will say that one thing that I did different from what Sandy did last year is that I'm not excited about the choice to split a borrowing authorization because that really doesn't help anything, right? So if you know, if like a project, let's take the $6 million project, the road project. It may or may not cost that much, but say we have a project that's $6 million. We know that's going to be borrowing. If we put that in multiple years, then we're authorizing borrowing over multiple years. We can't. But when we actually do a project, it takes us multiple years to do all the borrowing. It's much more advantageous for us to just acknowledge, yep, it's a $6 million project, whatever it is. You know, we're picking on that one, right? And yes, we're going to borrow it in stages as we develop the project, and the cost of that project will blend over time. And so that's the difficult part of this. Part of the list is that list doesn't take into account that a borrowing is going to be stretched out over time versus paid for in cash. And I, you know, made a decision that I thought it was best to do as much cash as we could and limit the amount of borrowing we're doing right now because I know it's coming and it's a lot. And so like the more room we have in that borrowing later and the more cash we can spend now, the more we can get done. And we don't spend, you know, 25-30% on interest over the life of the project, maybe even 50% if they're 30-year projects, just because we couldn't afford it today. And so the one borrowing that I have in this list, and we can change that, you know, we can say, you know, one of these other big projects could be borrowed and then make it all fit, or we can make the choice to not do one of the projects, which you may do. But the one project that is being borrowed is the other half of the the
The
radio
one
thing.
the one
Yeah.
we split, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's like, well, we can't do half the project, but we haven't spent the money on the radio project yet anyway, I think because the project costs the $2 million. And so we're sitting waiting for the rest of the project to be funded as the cost goes up. So,
Nice.
that's just how I think of things and how I have forced some of those larger numbers into 1 year because that's the year we're going to start the borrowing. And then in the debt stuff, we'll see how that forecasts out.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think we're ready to adjourn, and
Kathy,
you are
would
very
you-
much, Melissa, just so you know, you're very much part of the conversation when we're having a conversation. It's not like we're just winging it with our recommendations. So, Bob,
Oh, okay, there are no attendees left.
there were,
was
there
just
was,
saying-
yeah, we don't have time for public comments, but I did look at the fact that there weren't any in the
Yeah,
public.
I don't think we had any all meeting.
No, all the police people were in the,
Okay.
our staff was
No,
in the,
No problem.
originally in
I
the
just wanted to make sure
attendees.
we
So your meeting
Counselor
notes on the line items is public comments, no public.
I feel so unloved.
So, we've been taking motions to adjourn just so we formally do it. So I'm making a motion to adjourn
second.
and I'll take a vote on it. Bob,
Aye.
Kathy is a yes, Lee,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes, please.
and Council Lord.
Yes.
We are adjourned, and Melissa, thank you
Yep.
so much, and Jennifer Lafontaine, bringing this all to us, I know was not an easy task, so thank you very much. We are
Have a good night.
adjourned at
Good night.
5:59.